This is Cast 1, race officer speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming.
1.5 below.
Stand by, 2 dives here, boys.
We're looking at 10.5 and 42.
Welcome back, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. It's great to have you along for this edition of the podcast. I'm going to keep this little intro quite short because, as you'll know from the title, this is part 2 of our chat with America's Cup superstar Jimmy Spithill. If you haven't listened to part 1, then maybe go back a step and give it a listen first, then rejoin us here for part 2. As you'll know, since the age of just 20, Jimmy has been sailing in the America's Cup for some of the biggest teams in the sport. In part 1, we heard how he broke into the Cup world and how he picked up a reputation as a fierce competitor out on the water. We left Jimmy having just lifted the Cup for the first time in Valencia back in 2010, winning his first Cup for Larry Ellison's BMW Oracle Racing. And we pick things up looking forward to racing the giant AC-72s out in the windy waters of San Francisco Bay. It was an exciting time for the sport. Foiling for so long in the distant horizon was becoming a real thing. And Jimmy gives us a real insight into that period of time, before of course revealing just how his team managed to somehow rip themselves from the jaws of certain defeat to successfully defend the Cup against Emirates Team New Zealand. It's a compelling story and great to hear it from someone so heavily involved. I hope you enjoy the time I spent with Jimmy Spithill.
But you don't really know how bad your plan is until you have to use it. Well, the game changer was foiling upwind. The upwind leg was our Achilles heel. Not a lot of people know this, but before that race, we had a major failure.
From the giant trimaran of 2010, by 2013, of course, it was all about the foils. Can you describe that period, getting to grips with flying a 72-foot multi-hull?
Yeah, well, it took us a little bit of time to come to grips to learning to fly that. We definitely tripped over initially with our first boat. I mean, we were really aggressive in our approach, design-wise, for led, and the sailors, we were all fully behind that, really pushing actually to, in terms of foils, in terms of the aerodynamic package, and yeah, we really pushed. Even the hulls, our hulls were noticeably smaller in volume than anyone else. Like, if someone does a scale drawing, it was just like, oh wow, it looks like half the volume in our hulls, sorry. But the foils were a big one. The foils had zero stability, basically. They were just an L, and even, by the time we got to Bermuda, only then were we starting to figure out, how to handle those sort of foils. So, and as you can imagine, the control systems and stuff like that, we really didn't know what we were doing. We were just kind of learning along the way. But yeah, it was a huge undertaking. I mean, just again, a 72-footer, those wings were big and powerful, and San Francisco Bay is, as we all know, you're really sort of jumping into the Coliseum, because you're going to get wind, it's cold, you got the fog, you got the current. Alcatraz is just one of those places that are formidable.
Describe that feeling, capsizing the multi-million-dollar AC-72 like that in San Francisco Bay.
Yeah, it's definitely my mistake, no doubt about it. I mean, it was only our 7th day on the water, and we shouldn't have been out there. We were just trying to essentially sprint before, we're still kind of learning how to walk with that boat. And the forecast, as it does, we were thinking it was actually going to be quite a bit lighter. And then as soon as we get out there, it's just like, bang, it's on. And so we'd done a few laps, and we'd already had a couple of, not exactly what I call controllable bearaways, but we'd done it. And anyway, I remember we got to the bottom of Alcatraz after getting down there and sort of chatting to the boys and sort of saying, geez, we're on the edge here, but I was like, let's just do one more lap, and then we'll go back. And so off we went, and at this point it was like nuclear. I remember going up past Alcatraz, the tide was in full ebb flow, just going out the bridge. And as we're getting up to the bridge, it's like we're going to have to bear away here because the current was like 6 knots. And when you go back and go through like a big mistake or a big incident, it is quite amazing just how many mistakes you can make. I mean, that day, right at that time, was the strongest airflow current of the year. That exact time, you know, so even if it wasn't that amount of wind, it'd still be something you'd be saying, hey guys, let's not forget, even if we just have a problem, we have to stop, we're going to be dragged out under the bridge offshore. And that day, given the conditions, it's just, you did not want to go offshore, outside. And so anyway, we got to that point and we basically, all right, we're going to go for it, you know. I mean, no, you can't sort of wave the white flag or pull the wing down, here we go. So off we go, put the hammer down and in we go. And, you know, everyone just suspended there. And then just before we went in, I remember just screaming, just keep an eye, you know, watch everyone, you know, watch your mates, because, you know, it was pretty obvious we were going over. But yeah, it was a long night.
When you look back on that time, I mean, do you think perhaps overconfident?
Oh,
maybe?
No question.
A little bit of arrogance.
For sure. Yeah, no question. And I think part of it too was, at that time we were doing the World Series, and we had been pretty much dominating the World Series, you know, the Oracle boats, and we had just come off doing the double. You know, back then the World Series was, you have a fleet racing event and a match racing event. And so we had done the double in San Diego, and then we'd done it again in just recently in San Francisco. So we're all sort of, you know, confident and, you know, gung-ho, and yeah, and no one else had even done the double once. No one ever did. So no doubt about it. Yeah, way too confident. And not only that, but we thought we had a plan in place for an incident like this. I mean, we knew it was, we never wanted to do a capsize, but when you sail a boat like this, it's on the cards, and you need to have a plan. But you don't really know how bad your plan is until you have to use it. And, you know, just the big mistake from that incident was trying to rewrite the boat. Because all along we were thinking, kind of like the 45s, like actually in that San Francisco World Series event just before, we'd had a big nosedive and capsize near the shore at the reaching mark, pulled the boat up, and then we raced the next race. So we were all thinking, if we ever put this boat in, we're going to right it, and then we'll try and get it back to the dock. Problem is, while we were trying to right it and align the boat, by the time we'd picked up all the guys out of the water and sort of got somewhat of a plan together, Mother Nature's just dragging us out under the Golden Gate Bridge. And at that time, I remember climbing on the boat, trying to put lines on it to righting lines, but this was all taking time. And so I just remember sitting on the hull, the top hull, when the boat's on its side, and I remember the shadow going over me as I was tying this line. I just looked up and it's the Golden Gate Bridge. And I just remember just going, oh shit. And you could see out in the potato patch, the waves were breaking, the area just a few miles outside of the bridge. And at that point, that was the big mistake. We should have just kept the boat on its side, towed it to Sausalito or even to Marina Green. But we had in our minds, and I certainly did too, let's just get the boat up. Let's get the boat up quick, and we'll sail it back. And it was a huge mistake.
And then the cup itself, of course. I mean, we've talked about it quite a lot on this podcast. And I can clearly remember out on the water, race one, watching the pair of you charging down that first reach and thinking that I was witnessing a real shift in sailing history. Ignoring all the importance, the politics and money and all of that, I mean, can you have time to enjoy racing like that? I mean, what were those early races like?
Yeah, they were. I mean, it was just amazing. I mean, we had done a little bit of two-boat racing. You know, Ben Ainsley was driving the other boat, and so we'd had somewhat of a bit of a taste of what was to come. We'd run our own little somewhat of Defender trial series on the actual racetrack, I think before the Defenders raced, or on one of the off days. But it was just amazing. I mean, you'd just be hitting the reach on these 72-footers, you know, doing speeds up over 40 knots, and it was mind-blowing. I mean, it was just unreal. It was so physical. Like, the guys were seriously pushed to their limit, but it was just this adrenaline rush that you just wanted more. You just couldn't wait for the next day to go out there again.
just before the recent podcast with Kyle Langford, your wing trimmer for that cup. I emailed you and asked you for a few ideas on Kyle as a teammate. And you wrote back, I mean, such a lovely reply. If he ever needs a reference, he's pretty safe with you, Jimmy. I mean, you gave him a lot of credit for the turnaround in fortune, but so much came together to make that win a reality and make the difference. You know, what made the difference, do you think? How did you go from 8-1 down to walking away with the trophy?
Well, the game changer was foiling upwind. I mean, the upwind leg was our Achilles heel, you know, and I think a big part of that was, especially in the manoeuvre, one, we were sort of into somewhat of a bit of a higher, slower mode, but clearly our hulls were slower when they were in the water. When we're up on the foils, you know, you'd see on the reaching leg and the downwind leg, the boats were really similar. I think we had a better aerodynamic package, but their foils had a little bit better sections and they could accept a little bit higher cavitation speed. And I know that because we worked with their foil trimmers in the next campaign. So downwind, the boats were super even. Reaching, they were pretty even. Ironically, all our spying and reconnaissance work had said that we're going to be quick upwind and struggle downwind and reaching, and sure enough, you know, it was the opposite. But yeah, the upwind foiling was a game changer, and the guy that brought it up was Tom Slingsby originally. You know, I remember we were out two boat sailing, and at the time he had done quite a bit in the moth class, and I remember him saying, "Geez, I really think the upwind foiling could be a game changer," you know, and I remember we tried it a few times, but the big issue was the boundaries. You know, like if you had no boundaries and you go to ley line, you could afford to sort of bear off, get the boat on the foil, pay some BMG, but then get it back later. And you didn't do that perfectly. You know, at that time we were trying to learn, and you'd have a crash, and then if you'd had a crash, then you'd almost be close to the boundary and it wouldn't be worth it. So anyway, we started to, Tom, you know, was the guy that brought the idea up, and then we're like, at that point, once we got into the cup and things were going the way they were, we didn't really have an option. We're like, we're going to have to figure this out, because if we can, you know, you could see the upwind foiling was good, but we had to figure out how to do the technique and the control systems and you're so on demand on these boats. I mean, both teams were at that point then starting to look at it. You know, we remember seeing Team New Zealand trying to foil upwind, and you'd sort of get the boat going, and then you'd crash off the foil, you'd slide to leeward. But eventually we started to figure it out. And we were pushing all our hydraulics guys, because I was the one adjusting the foil and trying to get coordinated with Kyle, and it was a massive commitment from the grinders to provide this power, you know, to essentially be pumping the wing to try and get on the foil and then maintain it. We had to learn pretty quickly.
One of the highlights of the Cup for me was your answer to the press. I'm thinking about 8-1 down. I mean, the daily press conference after another hard day on the water. And you came back with that immortal quote, "Imagine if they lost it from here." And we were filming that press conference. I remember smiling to myself and thinking how punchy it was to sit up there and say that, knowing what you knew about the gains you needed to be making. Were you actually thinking that, Jimmy, or was it all just a bit of bravado?
Well, at this stage, we had started to figure out the upwind foiling, you know, like, and again, you know, it was a huge credit to Kyle. He had really jumped in at the end to replace Dirk de Ritter, to replace Cheese, and really trying to get that technique right. Trimming the helming, the control, the adjustment of the foil, and the grinders having to apply this power. It was really tough. It was pretty challenging. But we could see it, you know, and we could see our performance improving. The big thing was the tacks, because before, when we were in displacement sailing upwind trying to tack, our transoms were almost underwater. Like, we clearly had made a mistake with the hulls. So again, if we could get the boat on the foils and go into attack, you know, closer to sort of 28, 30 knots of boat speed as opposed to 25, we were going to have much better tacks. And at that point, now the upwind leg, instead of it being a weakness, was starting to become our strength. So I think that the feeling in the team was, well, yeah, I mean, it ain't going to be easy. Like, this is a massive mountain we've got to climb. But you could sense in the team that no one was going anywhere. And for me, a lot of that came back to the capsize, because that was a moment where we were going to see, well, how is the team going to respond here? Because, man, we didn't have long to go. We just wiped this. It was a write-off, the boat. You know, how is the team going to react? The guys, like all the boat builders and engineers, they just spent blood, sweat and tears into this thing, and on the 7th day sailing, we destroyed it. And I was sort of fascinated myself, like, oh, how are we all going to react here? Like, is it going to be this sort of blame game witch hunt, which was going to be pretty quick because my hand was up. But how are we going to respond? And everyone just said, no problem, we can bounce back from this. We're going to get through this. There was no splitting apart. The only thing that happened during that period after the capsize was everyone pulled himself together, said, okay, guys, new plan. We've got to learn from this. We've got to go through the mistakes and get stronger. And I'll actually never forget a call Larry made to me the morning after the capsize. You know, I got home at, 4 or 5 in the morning, didn't sleep, obviously, and then came in. We had a 9 o'clock sort of planning meeting. And I was kind of expecting a call from Larry, naturally, given it was all over the news. And straight off the bat, I just said, look, I'm sorry. You know, I'm completely responsible, and we just shouldn't have been out there. It was a huge mistake. And he said, listen, after a bit of a pause, he said, that's not why I called you. He said, look, it was amazing you got everyone back. No one was hurt. They got the boat back. And he said, listen, champions and champion teams always come back. And he said, look, I think you've got the team to do it, and you need to use this as an opportunity to actually try and grow stronger. Don't use this as something that could stop you winning the cup. Come up with a new plan and respond to it. And it was just at that time, I remember it being just like a bolt of lightning going through my body, like, because I was so, you know, just of what had happened and the mistakes, and suddenly it was like, yeah, well, hang on, yeah, we can't just sort of say, oh guys, let's forget about it, you know, like move on. But we had to go through and understand how did we do that and learn the lessons. But we had to use it as an opportunity and a learning experience to get better. So when we got to the 8-1 period, we kind of knew no one was going to split apart, because it was like, well, guys, if we can get through that capsize, all of the boat building team, the shore team, the engineers, like guys are just working through the night, because the upwind foiling wasn't the only thing we were changing. I mean, we changed the wing a bit. We were working on the rudders. We were just constantly, we were super aggressive with the bow spread. At that time, to use a code 0, you needed a bow spread. So we'd take it off because it was windage. Now, I know that San Francisco is typically 20 knots every day, but you do get the odd day where the fog stays in and it's lighter. So we were running that risk. We're putting a lot of pressure on, like Juan Villa, our weather guy, and the weather team. But we had to. I mean, we're at this point where we had to be aggressive and really push it. But at that point in the press conference, I was just getting sick and tired of talking about us losing. I just, you know, I mean, you're obviously exempt from this comment, but at the end of the day, most of the media, I mean, they're as sharp as bowling balls, and none of them most of them haven't actually gone onto the field of play, onto the battlefield, and so I knew what the feeling was like in the team, and the feeling in the team was no one's throwing the towel in, and everyone's going to do whatever it takes, and until they go to 9 wins, we're in this. And so then at a certain point in the press conference, I was like, well, if you want to talk about losing, yeah, you've been talking about us, but what about them? Imagine if they lost from here. And then suddenly it was just like this shift where everyone started, because the momentum had gone our way and the guys believed we had the boat and the tool and everyone was sort of, you know, ramped up for it. But then we started to rack up some wins. And you could see the guys were believing in it, and we were getting better too as a team, just technique-wise and understanding how to foil and manoeuvre. But yeah.
It was quite something, wasn't it? I mean, so you started off with, 2 points down because of a much talked about pre-regatta penalty. You'd struggled early on, you'd changed personnel, you'd pulled the cup into the longest ever contest period and fought to an 8-all scenario. Winner takes all, one race. A very rare scenario in cup history. And you're motoring out to the start line. What is Jimmy Spithill thinking at that point?
Yeah, that one for sure was the toughest race, because after we had levelled and got to 8-all, I remember all the media wanted to talk about was, you've done it. You know, you've pulled off this amazing comeback. You know, and so, but we hadn't. You know, to climb this mountain and then stop a couple of feet short of the summit. I mean, it just would have been, man, I don't even know the word what to say. So the message in the team was, all we've got to focus on is this one race. And that really had kind of been the mantra as we're getting the comeback was, guys, we don't need to win the 8 today. Let's just do one race. Let's just focus, just do everything we can to just win one race. And that's what we tried to do. Now, naturally as humans, you go home and you go back to sleep and yeah, you think about the end result. There's no two ways about it. But everyone did a concerted effort to really just think about that one at a time. And then once we got there, it's not over. We've got to finish this off and win this race. And yeah, we had figured out how to get the boat going upwind, but mate, these guys are right there with us. And it only took one little mistake we saw the Kiwis almost capsize in one race. It was so easy to get it wrong in these boats. I mean, the hydraulic system, everything was pushed to the absolute limit. So it was, you know, having a failure wasn't uncommon. And actually, not a lot of people know this, but before that race, we had a major failure. It almost looked like we weren't going to race the final race. I'll never forget, we'd done the dock out show. And typically, I think you got about 45 minutes to sail before the race. And so here we are, we're in this one race for all the marbles. Out we go, we get off the tow, we just start shooting the wing on and then just this massive bang, you know, of carbon. And I remember, you know, saying to Kyle or someone, oh, geez, that didn't sound good. So we got one of our shore team guys, Jeff Causey, he got it into the rackets, went straight up, and then basically came straight down. You could just tell it was not good. And so a tugboat, Mark Turner and a few guys got on the boat and they started getting this plan together. And Jeff's up there with, you know, this hot glue and bits of carbon, and so we're just trying to sort of stay in the game because the clock's sort of ticking. And meanwhile, we're just sitting head to wind with Jeff up the rig with power tools and what we call meth, this super high toxic epoxy. Tugboat's grinding carbon plates on the deck with two of the guys. And there's Team New Zealand just doing laps, you know, doing pre-start work, just doing laps of the course. And I'll never forget when he started grinding into these carbon plates to send up to Jeff, like the noise of it. And Ben and I were talking at the time about the weather and the course and stuff, and then you hear this grinder cutting carbon. And Ben and I just looked at each other and just started laughing. You know, like, it was just like, of all the time, when would this happen? Anyway, finally, Jeff gets done. We're literally about to enter the start at this point. Jeff comes down and he goes, okay, yep, look, just to be quite honest, mate, just take it easy because we just need a little bit more time for the meth to go off, for the glue to go off. And I was like, yeah, mate, no worries. Yeah, off we went. Jeff jumped off 40 knots straight into the start. And even on that leg, at the end of the reaching leg, we had a massive nosedive, like fell off the foil. And I just remember thinking, I didn't even look up at the wing. Like, I just couldn't do it. I remember just looking forwards and eventually looking up on the downwind leg and thinking, oh, it's still there.
And then you've won it. I mean, a storyline that at one point seemed so unlikely. It's a script that you could probably never write. Some call it the greatest comeback in world sport. Personally, Jimmy, for you, you know, you've had the podium moment, you've done the interviews, you've sprayed the champagne. But then eventually there's that moment, isn't there, where you're alone, where you can actually sort of breathe out and you begin to realise just what you've done. What did you do? How did it feel at that moment when you could finally realise?
I think it just took a long while to really sink in, and I think part of the reason to that was one, everyone was like sick at the end, like because we'd been going non-stop. No one was getting days. The entire team, not just the sailors, but the shore team were working all through the night. And so during the end of that regatta, everyone basically had the flu or had something. But adrenaline was just, it was just nothing stopping you getting on that boat. And you wouldn't even think about it. But then the body finally knows you're not going out on the boat tomorrow. So one, everyone was sick, but two, there was just this massive media requirement that, like that comeback and story had captured the attention of mainstream media. And in America, it was just, now it had turned into this, like everyone wanting to watch, first of all, like these crowds that would turn up. But then afterwards, everyone wanted to talk about it, you know, and all this media thing. And so we'd never, I think for the Cup, we'd never had any of that sort of media, probably, well, I guess in America, except for maybe back when Dennis was dominating, you know, and he was going to the White House and stuff like that, and they were doing ticker tape parades. But from that point on, it had really lost interest, especially in America. But because of the boats, because of the story, the whole thing, it just was this relentless media tour. And to be quite honest, I just wanted to, I didn't really want to do it at first. But then I sort of thought, and I remember Russ saying to me, well, look, you've got a responsibility now to do this because this could be really good for the sport. And, you know, and he was right. And I'm like, okay, you've got to do it. And the next thing you know, I'm just, like for the next couple of weeks, you're on like late night shows, you know, Jay Leno and Colbert and, you know, just all the big ones going around. And I'll never forget, we were on the Colbert show and we had the whole segment, but Tom Hanks was there pre-recording something. Anyway, so I'm in the green room, and then, so I'd done my piece, and then I was in there just having a beer and chatting to some of the guys. And then after Tom and Stephen Colbert had finished, they came in. And Stephen Colbert's actually a big sailing fan. But Tom Hanks had seen it. And he was from, I think, Auckland. He grew up in Auckland. And he was in there. And we're just, like, it was just surreal. Like, I'm sitting there in the green room with these sort of guys. Tom Hanks is arguably probably the best actor in the world. And he's sort of asking questions about the racing. You know, he'd seen it. We're having a beer. We're just joking. And the whole time, his assistant is saying, Tom, we've got to go. Like, the plane's leaving, we've got to be... And he's like, no, just wait. Tell him to wait, you know? Like, he wasn't genuinely interested in what had happened. Both of them were. And I found that everywhere we went, on any media tour, whatever show in New York, like, people would literally in Manhattan would come up and stop me on the street. And I remember the guy with Red Bull who was taking me around to all these shows, he was like, mate, I was just here with Sebastian Vettel, and no one stopped him. So it was just... we just hadn't seen that in the sport. But sorry about the long answer, but the reason it took so long to settle in is it just didn't really get a break for, you know, at least a couple of weeks. And then slowly over time it started to, you look back and you think, just what an incredible group of people and what an amazing team to be able to pull off, you know, what we did with everything that happened along the way, all those speed bumps and issues we had to deal with. It really was the ultimate team, and it's that sort of feeling when it does come together, a large group like that. It's you can't put it into words, but it's so addictive that I don't know if it's achievement, I don't even know what the word is, but that feeling you get when that does come off, especially in that fashion, you want more. You know, it's like, fill it up again. You know, it's working in a team, in a large team like that, to me has been, without a doubt, one of the most rewarding experiences in my life, because you learn so much about yourself and about others.
Jimmy, you always talk about you always talk about the team, but you were the guy that was fronting that team. You were the guy in the press conference. I mean, you were the guy doing all those difficult interviews, you know, with Dean. You were the guy driving the boat. I just wondered if you had a sort of personal moment where you thought, you know, I can't believe it all happened. You know?
Yeah, for me it was, I had the way I was getting confidence was in the people around me, and that's always been the case. Like, honestly, like, I've always, if there's one thing that I've just been really lucky on, is always having great people around me, and most of the time better. So that has kind of forced me into having to work pretty hard and train hard just to sort of get to their level. But it was just another case in San Francisco, where it was surrounded by an amazing group of people. That's where I was getting the confidence from, and I was just trying to portray what the feeling was in the team. But you know, in my view, I was, as is the case in these campaigns, just a small part in the machine, you know, there, and just lucky to be surrounded by good guys.
One thing I don't think I've heard you discuss much, Jimmy, is why the Cup. And by the end of 2013, you'd won it twice. It had taken up most of your adult life, you know, until then. Why keep going? What was it about the Cup that meant you stayed with Oracle and went for that second defence?
Well, a big part was Larry and Russell. You know, I mean, they really, Russell was the guy that, now that I'm not working for him, I can give him some praise because I'm not going to cop any crap from anyone. But Russell was the guy I looked up to, and certainly the match racing team, when we started out, it was, you know, Russell and his guys. You know, it was like Brad, Simon, you know, Warwick. They were the team, and they had this sort of aura about them on the match race circuit. So they were the ones we wanted to be like. You know, they were the guys we were looking up to. So to be able to work with Russell and then Larry was incredible. And the thing also I loved about Larry, well, both of them actually, they're both really candid, like they're really direct, they're really tough, but they're really fair. And but they have fun. You know, like a big part, and Russell's for sure like this, is it's got to be an enjoyable experience. Otherwise, why do it? I always had a lot of respect for Larry because he was never afraid to put himself on the line. Like he would, I remember in the RC44 that we were all the top guys were there. You know, Ainsley, Barker, I mean, all the guys were there. And so the owners would drive the fleet racing and then the pros would jump on and they'd do the match racing. But Larry was like, well, I want to go against the best. I want to go against these guys. He'd be out there winning regattas. Like, I just couldn't believe how good he was, because it wasn't like he was training as much as us. And sure, okay, people would say, well, yeah, but Russell's a tactician. Well, I can tell you there's a few events where Larry didn't do it. Russell steered the boat and they didn't win. So, you know, clearly he was good. So I just love the fact that he wasn't afraid to put himself on the line and go out there and get on the field of play. So I really enjoyed, and the way he handled the capsize, the way he was there for us every single day during the comeback on San Francisco, he was the same attitude, like, well, we're not going anywhere. We're in this, not giving up. We're not going to throw the towel in. So for me, a big part of it was, for those guys, and we'd build a culture, you know, inside the team, and to be part of that, and you know, and effectively one of the guys that are running the team, it was a great experience. So why go anywhere? I'm never going offshore again unless it's on an old team. Everything else is too slow. You got to sort of climb up off the canvas. You got to learn the lessons, come back, and not throw the towel in. Because it's a new class, you got 4 completely different boats, completely different foils.
It's been a really exciting time in sailing, hasn't it? I mean, not just in Cupland, but, you know, offshore, the giant all-team trimaran, foiling in Mocha 60s and crazy fast laps of the planet. We saw you out sailing with Francois Gabard, you know, a while back on his foiling trimaran. You know, is a lap of the planet something, you know, that would tempt Jimmy Spithill?
With the team, maybe, yeah. Yeah, definitely had a little look into it, and I've done a bit of sailing now with Francois. We did a training session off the coast of Brittany, and then we did the Fastnet race, which was really cool. And I tell you, man, that guy's my hero. These French guys are another level. You know, they're the best in the world offshore. It's hard to sort of explain to people, especially non-sailors, just what these guys are really accomplishing. I mean, just as a human, to take a boat like that and do a lap of the planet, go down south, and be pushing in these sort of speeds. It's not a monohull. It's not like you're not doing it just to complete a circumnavigation. You're racing a record on a huge trimaran, and these things now foil. And I remember we'd be out in these training runs or even doing the Fastnet. There's times when you're getting, you know, some bad weather or a storm. And I'd just be thinking, you know, there'd be, you know, a handful of us, like 4 or 5 on these things. I think, how the hell does he do this on his own? You know, like, it was just mind-blowing. But he's one of those guys that he has all the traits of being an incredible leader. Like, he's got no ego, he has fun, enjoys himself. He's really, really open to feedback and ideas. is this great culture inside his entire team and outfit. And we ended up becoming pretty good mates, and we both love surfing and foil. We did a bit of foil surfing together there in France, and yeah, he could definitely be successful, I think, in any part of the sport, whether it's America's Cup, whether it's, clearly, I mean, he already is successful in what he's doing around the world. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, maybe that appeals to me because it's pushing the limits. The Volvo doesn't really appeal to me because I'm not a fan of the boats. Like the last race, I was a fan of the racing. I mean, the racing was awesome, and then there was a lot of mates of mine, Kyle and TJ and a few boys that were in there. But the boats just did nothing for me. But then when you go out on an old team and you're doing almost 50 knots in the middle of the night, and you're just punching through waves, and that is appealing. So who knows, maybe one day. It was funny, I was joking with a few of the guys off Comanche the other day saying, I'm never going offshore again unless it's on an old team. Like, that's just, everything else is too slow. Like, I can't sit there and be thinking, I could be doing like 40 knots right now. Why am I on this monohull bashing away? And eventually it'll change. Races like the Sydney to Hobart and that, they'll come around to multi-hulls because they're just so much faster.
If they foil around the planet, it's not going to take very long. You won't be gone long, Jimmy.
Well, the boats are so quick, they go with the system. They hook onto these weather systems and then off they go. So a big part now is how much do you shortcut the lap? How early do you turn? And that's one of the beauties of the foiling is the performance. You can take a bit of a shortcut in somewhat of a lighter area on the globe, but be foiling and still having these quick numbers. But it still blows my mind. To me, it's like someone scaling Everest, what they do. I'm not sure really what else you could compare when you look at, say, Joyon or Francois and a lot of these guys that did this single-handed lap in an old team, a record run. I just don't know what else you can compare it to. I think it's probably one of the toughest things you could do as an athlete or a human. It's got to be there with Everest. Maybe even worse. Not worse, maybe harder. I don't know. Never done either.
It's well known that you're not all about sailing. You've taken the whole foiling thing into surfing, and I'm guessing you're getting a fair bit of time on the foil out here in Sardinia. I mean, certainly today you've got bloodshot eyes, yeah. Jimmy. You've been in the surf all day. I mean, what's your real passion away from the boat?
Well, I love competition, but I love the water. It's just, I think growing up on it was a big part of that, but it offers so much, and we're just so lucky to be in a time right now where so many of the water sports are going through this amazing evolution of, learning and some of the hardware. I mean, you look at kiteboarding, guys are now foiling. You look at surfing, guys are on foil boards. Windsurfing. There's just so many cool things in the game now, the moths, all that sort of stuff that, man, it's just, what an incredible time to be involved in the game.
We went to Maui a few years back and interviewed Kai Lenny about Robbie Nash. We were making a Robbie Nash show, and Kai Lenny knew all about you and all about the Cup, and I guess it was so interesting for me that he thought what we do is as cool or as interesting as what he was doing, that we were part of that revolution.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Larry and Russell really deserve that recognition because they're the ones that made that call to go into, just a new world. And there was a lot of criticism. I mean, basically everyone the majority of the sailing world was against it, let's face it. But look, exactly what you said, the recognition and kind of the credibility you get now from other sports, other athletes. Robbie Nash, a god of water sports. And you look at him, he's really always been about evolution and pushing that next step, whether it's been kiteboarding, he's always been there on the front. I was just out on one of his wings he'd sent over, one of these bat wings you use when you go out, and Laird Hamilton, a lot of those sort of guys who I was fortunate enough now to become kind of mates with. Kai is another one. I mean, I really think someone like Kai is probably the ultimate waterman right now. I mean, I don't think there's anyone else at his level that can do it all at that level. And I remember spending some time with him and staying at his house in Maui, and you can see why. I mean, it's like that environment. Like Kai gets up at about 4 a.m. Okay, off we go on the truck. The first thing's surfing, and then we're into paddle boarding, and then downwinders, and then kiteboarding, windsurfing, and you basically do every water sport. You get home, and you go to bed at about 7 o'clock. You know, they say Maui midnight is 9. No one, that's really late. But Kai's not the only one. It's all of these amazing surfers and watermen in the Hawaiian Islands on that environment. You know, John Florence, another one. That's what they're into. And so, yeah, it's cool to see, you know, this now with the foils, it really does apply to different areas that guys are really interested in.
Let's quickly talk about Bermuda, Jimmy. It was a long build-up, you know, the World Series events, the Challenger Series, and then, of course, the Cup itself. When did you realise that the defence was looking a bit shaky?
Well, not until the first race of the America's Cup, to be honest. I mean, we had won the Challenger Series. You know, we had 2 round robins. We'd won that. Got this. I think it was a bonus point up for grabs. At that stage, we'd raced Team New Zealand twice, beaten them twice. Both good races. But the key point was, both times we raced them was when we had our, I guess what we'd call our all-purpose foils, you know, or upwind foils. So we never really raced them in the light air. We'd watch them in races in the light air. You know, I remember a race, they were going against Ben's team, and they almost lapped him. And I remember thinking, and okay, Ben was off the pace, but still, I remember thinking, man, these guys are fast. Then we had this one sort of impromptu lineup as well right before the match, and they had their light air foils on, and we had our all-purpose foils, and we were in range with our all-purpose foils, and they were in the top end of their light air foils. And I remember them being the same speed quickly in this lineup, and we're all just like, man, these guys look really good in the lighter stuff. Sure enough, Cup is raced in everything in light air, and real quickly off the bat, it's obvious they're significantly faster, like got a huge edge. And man, we've got our work cut out for us.
They're all consuming, aren't they, Cup campaigns? You know, how do you deal with losing the Cup? You know, is it a big deal? You'd won it twice. How hard is it to see another team taking the trophy away?
Well, I mean, first of all, you couldn't help but respect and admire what Team New Zealand had done. You know, you look at San Francisco and how that was no other way to put it. It was brutal. You know, the way that that loss went. So the fact that they were able to regroup, pull themselves back together, and come back and run a campaign like they did, which was really a perfect campaign. They didn't really get anything wrong. You couldn't help but admire that and respect it. That was the first thing. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was just a real. Again, it's hard to put words into it, but basically just let everyone down at the end of the day. That was the feeling. And to summarise it really quickly, too conservative. And I think sometimes success can do that. I mean, we'd won 2, we're going for 3 in a row. And I remember a lot of times we would be in meetings and we'd be discussing which way to go or what sort of a foil or whatever it was. And a lot of the time, we'd sort of take a more conservative decision. And when I say me, I was involved in there. You know, I was in a leadership role. And I think in the earlier campaigns, we were aggressive. You know, we were just pushing it right to the limit. We want to go, we want to push it, you know. I think that was part of it, so we were definitely more conservative. And then at the end of the day, really not going, you know, with my instincts during that process, during those few years. At a few times, it just felt in my gut that, I remember a simulator, you know, really, I remember Mike Drummer and I talking about a simulator when we were at the Trimaran, like, you know, offhandedly and this about it. And then at the beginning of the Bermuda campaign, really looking hard at it, you know, met 2 companies, and at the end of the day, just couldn't get buy-in and agreement to really push forward. And I should have pushed harder on that, you know. I really sort of, you know, there was a lot of things like that where I was just too conservative and really dropped the ball there. So yeah, it was a tough one. But again, what is, at the time it's not good, but what is great about these experiences is you are going to make mistakes. It's just a given. And there will be some defeats, and it's really, well, how do you use that defeat and that loss? And for me, it was, we've got to try and learn as much as we can from this. And like any defeat or big mistake, we've got to use it as education. And that was a big part of it, really trying to go through after that campaign and relive a lot of those fundamental decisions that happened earlier on in the campaign, right up until, and sure, we had some stuff not going, we had problems with pre-start software, problems with racing software, we had little things here and there, but the fact is that we made some fundamental decisions earlier on in a host of things that, we were wrong. We took the wrong direction on a few things, and, and ultimately as skipper, that was my responsibility, and it was a tough moment, to go through, because you're letting down essentially 100 people, and ultimately the hard part was really letting down Larry, because he was the guy that was there, from day one. And but again, like I said, you got to sort of climb up off the canvas. You got to learn the lessons, come back, and not throw the towel in.
Well, you are back. Here we are in Sardinia. I mean, this cup is looking very different, isn't it, Jimmy? I mean, you've been out sailing for a while now here. Give us an idea of what the new monohulls are like from on board.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're incredible. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of the AC-72 campaign, because it's such a big step again. We're not, the scale of the thing is big. Last time we were in 50-foot cats. So don't get me wrong, those things are quick, and they certainly are now, the F50s. But when you go to a boat that has the loads of a big 75-footer like this, with this amount of riding moment, you've got these huge sort of arms with the big chunks of lead on the sides. We're using a double sided mainsail, soft mainsail, so no hard wing. Man, it is incredible. I mean, the boats are really, really cool. I mean, they're very, very complex, the systems and the amount of load and trying to get this thing going. But mate, it is an amazing time, again, to be involved, because it's so new. I mean, it's just such a steep learning curve.
You've been in multi-hulls for years now. I mean, how different is it to be back in a monohull, albeit, of course, up on foils? How many sort of changes are you having to make? I mean, how fresh is it all?
Yeah, well, it's funny how it sort of came, everyone was sort of talking, a lot of people, I can't wait for it to go back to monohulls, about time, this and that. And I was kind of thinking, it was going to be a monohull, like a wicked up, I don't know, Comanche or a smaller version of that. So I didn't really know if I wanted to go back to the Cup again, because we'd just finished at this amazing level. Competitively, I wanted to be back. I want another shot. But when I was, going back to a monohull, I don't know. And then when I saw the first drawing come out, I was like, oh yeah, no, I want part of that. I want to be in there, so that looks really cool. And so it's one of those things where you really look forward to going out sailing every single day.
Can you give us an idea of what your role is here at Luna Rossa? I mean, will you be helming the boat at all?
Well, basically, Francesco Bruni and I are helming the boat. We're both sort of back and forwards and sharing it a bit. So I'm involved in the afterguard. The big change, obviously, is I'm not running the team, and so in some ways that, I actually really did enjoy a lot of the getting to learn how to really run a campaign and the budgets and all, dealing with sponsors and the commercial side. But there is something, when you get into a role like that, one thing you instantly notice is how much you appreciate the sailing, because in the past it's kind of all about the sailing, and then you get more responsibility and your time gets taken on the shore. So in some ways it's kind of cool to be back, really spending the majority of my time is all about the sailing. Plus, a big game changer in this campaign are simulators. I mean, these are incredible tools now. I mean, just how quick you can get these. I mean, the design tools in the past used to take quite a long time to get answers and to run different cases. Now with the simulators, and every team's got a simulator now, the Kiwis were the only ones last time to have it. It's incredible, because you can try all these different configurations, you can, just a host of things. So if you have bad weather, if you've got doing mods to the boat, you don't need a crane, you don't need, like even when you go out on the water with a big boat like this, you may only get some days just a couple of hours of quality sailing. The simulator, I mean, you can go as long as you can pay attention, really. So it's, really the design tools and the technology have come a long way, and it's a new world now.
Are you in competition then with Francesco? I mean, how's that going to roll out? Does it feel like that on board?
Well, every campaign that I've been involved with, it's always been, you try and hire the best people, and then, the guys on the boat will be selected based on giving the team the best shot at winning. I mean, that's always been the case, whether I've been not against, but with Peter Gilmore, with Russell Coots, Ben Ainsley, that's always been the case. So for me, I love that. I love working together with someone else, and Francesco and I get along really well. But yeah, working together, you both sort of push each other, you grow stronger. And then, the winning teams are always the one where you come in with the attitude of, I'll do whatever it takes, I'll do any role that is going to give this team the best shot at winning. And that's always been the case from day one, and this one's no different, really.
What are your thoughts on the other boats? I mean, there's been plenty of reconnaissance, hasn't there, by everyone? How are your rivals looking? There's not long now, of course, until the World Series event right here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the surprise is just how long it's probably taken to get these boats going. They were much more delayed than we all thought, because, and that happens when you're really pushing on the edge like this and doing a completely new concept. That's going to be the case. But we've got a year to go, and it feels like we're just starting to sail these boats properly now. Right now, I'd say the Kiwis are well ahead of the other teams. I mean, you can't deny that fact. They're on the race course doing race laps and looking really good. I see today they just launched a test boat, which makes sense because they're going to lose a big chunk of time, obviously shipping over here and shipping back. I think the Americans are going really well. Their manoeuvres look good, but ultimately, kind of like that example I gave to you about the San Francisco campaign, when we had, these spending heaps of money on reconnaissance, and we had all these lasers and stuff you're allowed to use then. None of that you can use this time. So all you can effectively do is video the other team and take photos, but you don't know. I mean, San Francisco, we're totally backwards on what we're going to be our strengths and weaknesses. And so until we really line up, and especially in a new class like this, that first World Series event in Cagliari is going to give us our first taste of, okay, strengths and weaknesses. Hopefully we get a bit of a mix of conditions. But it's cool because it's a new class. You got 4 completely different boats, completely different foils, control systems, how the crew sail it. I mean, it's such a fascinating period during this time.
I'm excited. I can't wait. Not long now, only a few weeks.
Yeah.
Jimmy, you've not long ago turned 40. I mean, it's often in everyone's life, a time for a bit of reflection. You've achieved a massive amount, but you're still hungry. You can see that. You've still got that fight. Where does that drive come from, do you think?
I just love working with great people. I love working in teams. Like I've done some sports where it's individual, and I can see how fulfilling that can be. But for me, the best reward has always come from working with great people in teams. It's just like the dynamic. You got the personalities, and as the team gets bigger, you've got even more, let's say personalities, but when you get it right, and when you get that culture right, where you're operating in a real candid and honest, effective way, and that is just such a fulfilling feeling when that comes off, that culture, and it's so addictive. And I'm it's got a bit of an obsessive nature, and man, I just keep coming back for more because it's just such a rewarding process to go through, because you learn so much about yourself while doing it.
The Cup really moves you about, doesn't it? I mean, you're here in Sardinia, you'll be heading to Auckland, I guess, quite soon, and before this you're living in Bermuda for years, before that the States. How hard is that sort of nomadic life? How difficult has that been for you and your family?
Yeah, I mean, you'd know this as well, obviously, that if there's one drawback to this sort of a lifestyle or let's say commitment, it's the time, your family really sort of does suffer on that side. But again, and I remember a mate in the military telling me this, is that you're either all in or you're not. And if you've committed to a team and you're going to do something, you have to do it. And so I'm just so fortunate and lucky that, I've got a partner that is, amazing. And for the most part, during these campaigns, let's be honest, has really raised the family and taken care of that. And there's no way I could have done that, without Jen. So, yeah, that's the one drawback for sure. But on the other side, I want to set an example for my kids that nothing comes easy. Unfortunately, life isn't fair, and not everyone gets dealt the same set of cards. But that's not the thing to focus on. What you focus on is how you're going to play those cards. What are you going to do? And so I think for anyone involved in the Cup campaign, it doesn't matter what role you're doing, it takes such a huge commitment, investment in your time. So for kids seeing their dad, if he's a designer, a boat builder, a shore-term member sailor, whatever it is, really passionately working hard, and ultimately if you're fortunate enough to achieve that goal, that's an incredible lesson for a child to see that. And I was lucky. I had, amazing parents, and, to a certain degree probably will never be able to match them because of the time I spend away. But if there's one thing I can do is to try and provide an example of, that hard work pays off, and and ultimately you never give up.
In those rare moments of reflection, how do you feel it's all gone? Both personally, that sailing mad kid from Pittwater, how's it all worked out for him?
Yeah, not too bad. No, it's just been an awesome ride, just an incredible ride. And yeah, do I have regrets? You're damn right I got regrets. There's a lot of stuff I wish I had said differently or done differently, behaved differently. But at the end of the day, would I change much? Nah, probably not. Because, even, when I say regrets, a lot of those things, I actually learned some pretty important lessons from it. So, yeah, I don't think I'd change a whole lot, to be honest.
Jimmy Spithill, thank you.
Thanks, Shirley.
It's been a big couple of hours with Jimmy. I really hope that you enjoyed it. It was really good to spend some time with him. He was relaxed, in good shape, enjoying Sardinia, and definitely relishing his role within Luna Rossa. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more of him as the America's Cup World Series kicks off. And I do have to say a huge thank you to Jimmy for being so enthusiastic about the podcast, for being so generous with his time and being so open with us. It was great to hear his stories, and I'm sure there'll be many, many more. Please let me know what you think about the podcast at Shirley Sail on Instagram and Twitter, just me on Facebook. And please do remember to like, review and subscribe on whatever platform you're joining us on. It's all a massive help. Thanks again to Tim at Vertigo Films for producing this bumper edition. I could hear him laughing, editing away with his headphones on. I think he's actually a secret Jimmy fan. Next month, we're back with the America's Cup, but with something a little different. If, like me, you've been glued to all the videos of the new AC-75s, this podcast will be unmissable. We take you under the bonnet of the new class of America's Cup boat with some of the key players in the design process, as all four teams all try to build the fastest monohulls the world has ever seen. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water. Sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming.
We're 1.5 below.
Stand by, 2 dives here, boys.
We're looking at 10.5 and 42.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.